Okay, hello friends. This is Adventures in Identification second series number 2. And I'm just experimenting with a little bigger picture to see if I can relate more easily to you in this way. Maybe we'll go back to the little postage stamp in the upper left-hand corner. We have been dealing with some of the entries I have in my diary here, one of them, and I just was working in the temple today thinking about these things, and I thought, well, again I'm receiving that prompting to share this with you and see if it is of any value. We talked about realization and the technique of evocative words, and the hope that the use of some of these maybe unusual words and phrases together can evoke a state of consciousness which is not habitually experienced, and if it is experienced, can contribute to the continuity of that experience. I have I have a little abbreviation here. I'm sharing with you my abbreviations. Being, this looks strange, doesn't it? BUEXEEEX, BUEXEEX. And maybe I could write it this way. BUEXEEEX, EEAX. Well, maybe I won't. It seems a little bit too hard to pronounce. BUEXEEX. So the idea here, although it's not exact, is that being un-expendable, everything else expendable. What can we mean by that? Well, we are faced with contents of consciousness. That's what everything really is. Every perception is a content of consciousness. And all of them unreal in the ultimate sense. And we have to learn how to detach ourselves from such an unreality. As the Buddha said, we desire existence in the phenomenal worlds, and that desire leads to all manner of grief and pain, because we are desiring to hold close to ourselves unrealities which are basically generated from the substance of the previous solar system. Now, of course, we might extend this idea quite a bit, even to perceptions or registrations on still higher planes, and also consider them unreal. But for the time being, if we look at the dense physical vehicle of the solar logos, everything found within those dimensions are unrealities from the perspective of the agenda program of the second solar system. So we have to learn a certain detachment. Learn detachment from the unrealities which are expendable in terms of valuation. If we value that which is found in the outer world, value it in any ultimate sense, we will find that it is not what it seems. And so often in valuing what we encounter in our contents of consciousness as if they were really realities and not projections or extensions of the one, then we set ourselves up for grief. The one thing that is not expendable, now, I could even write it this way, being not expendable, BNEX. Everything else expendable. Being is not expendable. We cannot do without it, or we would be doing without ourselves. So there comes a time when we have to learn how to relinquish all of our attachments to what Master DK calls the phantasmagoria, including other associated persons. We're not really looking at the reality, we're looking at the phenomenal registration of the reality. So under the law of repulse, the fourth law of the soul, we can let those things go and cherish the underlying reality. Now, what we have to do, we have to cherish the presentation, the phenomenon, the content of consciousness, as if it were the underlying reality. Some of the old mystics have said, well, maybe an ant in God is worth more than a treasure of immense value. It is the question of seeing any presentation as if it were an expression of the one infinite being, or an externalization of the one infinite being, as Master DK says when he talks about harmlessness, the expression of the life of the man who realizes himself to be everywhere, who lives consciously as a soul, whose nature is love, whose method is inclusiveness, and for whom all beings are alike in that they hide the light, I think it's that, and are but externalizations of the one infinite being. So never to lose sight of the substratum. And we can practice that, of course. You can think of a thing as it is, as if it were a reality, just look at it, and then look at it as if it is an externalization of the one infinite being. And then an overpowering sameness of essence strikes us with respect to any perception. So then we learn to value every perception as God, as the one, as being, but not as the thing it seems to be. So, BUEXEEX, being unexpendable, being non-expendable. Everything else, expendable, except as that everything else is seen as the illusory extension of the one. You can practice that. Just go through your life and see things as if they are ultimate, actualities. And then see them as if they are realities because they are extensions of the one reality or being. And this is all part of the great drama of detachment, because we cling to that which the one has become when it reduced itself. Now that's the game we play, but if we can be in that rapture of realizing everything to be the same thing, regardless of differences. It's not, as I say, it's not what you are, it's that you are. I have said this often. It is not what you are, but that you are. And this is the important thing. If we lose the substratum in relating to any content of consciousness, anything, a thing is a content of consciousness, we lose the essence of the thing to which we are attempting to relate. So, to put it in the terms of the old mystics, we have to try to see things in God. Well, we can put it more than that. See things in God, but better, you know what I'm going to say, see things as God. And, as always, this will take practice. Well, I have different things here. Maybe, Master Moria said there was a underlying rationale to the mosaic which he presented, because so often when you would read his various verses, you would find that you wondered why one was following another. It seemed like he changed his position, but then when he put them all together, he said, put them all together and you'll see the rationale behind that. I cannot say that of the entries in my little red book. I can only treat them maybe in isolation, and maybe overall there is an underlying field which will make some sense in retrospect. I have one now called this, Break into the Now. Well, I don't know if I should call it the now or the now. I suppose in my book, Infinitization, I had 3 different levels. One was the apparent now, which seems to change into the moment ahead. But we've discussed the idea that moments may not really exist at all, except because the logos, universal logos, in his own parameters, the parameters he set for his illusion, decides on the seemingness of moments, on the idea that there is a succession, and that's what I had said earlier, no succession in reality, and maybe I should only continuity. When I start writing in all big letters, it usually refers to the absolute. It's my hopeless, helpless way of referring to the absolute. Maybe capital letters should refer more to the universal logos, who exists or is the dimensionless point of being and the one fundamental existence of any universe. But in reality, there is no succession. There's only continuity. The minute there is succession, if there is succession, there is illusion, based on apparent division. As I say, I never know where my thoughts will lead me here, and I'm allowing myself that liberty, that license, of going with them. Usually I'm such a structured type when it comes to what I want to present. Exactly this and not that, rigorous, as I attempted to be in the book on the rays. But now I'm allowing something different, a little more spontaneity. So we try to we try to be the continuity of being. Or we try to be being in continuity. Be being in continuity. We try that. I don't know why everything suddenly turned red here, but I'll take care of that. And while we are being in continuity, we live the dual life and handle the illusion as if it were reality and important, never letting go or never ceasing in our continuity of being. Now, I suppose that requires practice and many lives. But it's a bit like the music of India, where the pedal tone is always existing, regardless of the variety that occurs above the pedal tone. The substratum is always there. The music reflects it. The one note sounding, which represents continuity of being, it never ends, it doesn't vary. And above it, all the great variety. I'm sure the philosophy of India is reflected in music of that sort. Break through into the now. Well, our usual consciousness is very hampered. There's only now and then, and before now and then to follow. And succession rules the day, apparent succession. Deceives our consciousness. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood. We have dealt with apparent succession forever, and will. It's the limiting game we play. It is, we descend into self-imposed limitation, which demands succession. And the very model of our life is filled with successive apparent moments. But from that, we have to break through into being, break through into the now. Break through into being, break through into now. Now, how we do that really is antichironic. It really depends on who you are as a monad and extension. We, like the spider, have to weave our own thread back to our origin. So there always is a life thread, but we have to weave a thread of consciousness out of our own present consciousness to restore ourselves to what we always have been, the monad at home. We are the monad in extension, and we are the monad at home. And there seems to be almost an unfathomable gulf between what we seem to be and what we really are. And that's why I use the word breakthrough. It's kind of Uranian in a way, but maybe other people would dissolve their way into being. I do that sometimes, maybe. Dissolve your way into being. Dissolve your way into the now. That's another way to go. Whatever it is, there are limitations, apparent limitations, which go beyond the apparent limitations which hold the consciousness in encapsulation. We're in that darkened room. We only see a few things out of the many things that are to be seen. We have to keep breaking those rings past not to enter an ever greater sphere until finally the universal sphere itself becomes our last limitation, because we have been retracted into the realization that we are the universal logos. And that sphere too will break. It's a temple. It's the great universal temple. And let's just say the walls of the great universal temple, sorry, my spelling, will break periodically. And all this despite the fact that there may be no movement at all in reality. It's a problem. If you divide, you can't divide. It's a boundless, immutable principle. Incapable of being divided, and yet apparently divided, divisible. So we have what's going on in reality, and we have the great seeming, which is the great illusion, and not to downplay the value of the great illusion, it is our creativity. I mean, who can possibly say why it all comes to be? Why does the perfect become imperfect? Perfect means utterly complete. Infinitudinously complete. So we can ask ourselves, why, if I could spell, does the infinitudinously complete, and maybe I just have to really, I really hate to do this, but I'm going to do it. Okay. Why does the infinitudinously complete become the incomplete? The finite incomplete. Well, maybe it really doesn't, but it seems to do so forever, cyclically. I don't think there's a way to answer that. I've tried to answer that in just hubris to try to answer such a thing, but, okay, you try. Try to say something with the limitations of mind that you have at the moment. And I've done that in the infinitization book. Why does the infinitudinously complete become the finite, the incomplete? Well, as I said, maybe it really doesn't, It's all an illusion. But it's the distance between the infinitudinously infinite and the one. As far away from the infinitudinously infinite as possible. Anything greater than one is closer to the infinitudinously infinite. But the one is as far away as you can go. And there's some compulsion to become what it isn't in order to be what it is, which sounds like nonsense, but okay. It is the great paradox. In order to be what it is, it has to apparently become what it isn't, periodically. Anyway, we have to enjoy this game, this self-becoming. We have to enjoy this. Rejoice in it. If we can achieve this ongoing sense of the nowness that is never varied, unvariable nowness, break into unvariable nowness, So if we can do that, oh, give me a colon there, break into unvariable, maybe I should say invariable, nowness, break into invariable being. So what can I call that? I just want my abbreviations. Break into invariable being, break into invariable, we'll call it nowness. Then we have the background we need. Then we have the pedal tone. The background necessary to enlightenment. Why do I capitalize that? Necessary to enlightenment. And I think, it's really worth the persistent effort to break the illusion, shatter the illusion of multiplicity and sequentiality. So I'll put it down here that this would mean to shatter the illusion of multiplicity and sequentiality. Can we think only of the one and of the now, without the now, without sequence? Because in succeeding itself, if the same succeeds the same, there's no succession. So part of the reason for programs of this nature is to help us give value to the breaking through into non-sequentiality and non-temporality and non-multiplicity, but to somehow be the homogeneity. So, to be, how do you spell that word? Homogeneity. Be the irreducible homogeneity. Now, there's no variety in that, I suppose, but the fun comes in being the homogeneity while being everything else as well. So that's identification, being everything else as well. We can say, being everything else as well. So no content of consciousness arises, but one is it. One is every arising content of consciousness. One is every arising content of consciousness, without exception. The good, the bad, beyond good and evil, one is it. Wherever, apparently to the farthest ends of the cosmos, to whatever is nearest at hand and most intimate, one is every arising content of consciousness. Oh, there's many lives of conditioning that have to be broken, dissolved, evaporated, whatever, to enter realizations of that nature. But, as DK says, when it comes to harmlessness, harmlessness is the life expression of the man who realizes himself to be everywhere. Everywhere. Well, there's no space between everywheres. Everywhere is everywhere. That means there's no such thing as everywhere here and not everywhere there. Everywhere is pervasive. So it doesn't make any difference what variety you confront. You are it. Like I said, I was taking a walk with my youngest son, and we were on this subject, and he said, "Dad, even the pavement?" We were looking down at the black asphalt. And I said, "Yes, Matt, even the asphalt. Even the asphalt. I should write a book called Even the Asphalt. ETA. Expected time of arrival. Even the asphalt." All right, now, I've got another entry here. Well, this is more, well, you know, it's kind of one of those aspirational things. RM Truth. Restore me to real usefulness to hierarchy. I suppose I remember I had an interview with Mary Bailey when I first went to work in the Arcane School, and she was talking about her attitude and the attitude of her husband, Foster Bailey, and his attitude toward hierarchy, which is what this, at least let me be useful. At least let me be useful. That struck me. You know how different moments in your life really hit you? That struck me. And I'm sure we all think of ourselves as having deviated from real usefulness to hierarchy and to the great plan of deity. So, you know, restore me to real usefulness to hierarchy. But then I looked at it and I said, oh my goodness, truth is in that. Every once in a while you get lucky and one of the little abbreviations actually spells something. And I thought, well, truth to real usefulness to hierarchy. And then I thought, well, there's also ruth, which oftentimes means regret in the old sense. Real usefulness to hierarchy, ruth. I said, well, you know, monad and extension that I am, and we all are, on the path of retraction, as that which has been emanated from that which we are above is retracted towards that which we are, the monad at home. We want to be useful to the greater archetype. There is a purpose, there is a configuration, there is something which is intended to be by ourselves when we knew better, when we were not in extension. There was a time when we were not in extension, then we didn't therefore have to be in retraction to restore ourselves to the original state. So we try to understand what is that design, that grand design which is meant to be. Ruth, real usefulness to hierarchy. And if we could be of real usefulness to hierarchy, we would be in perfect alignment with that lesser state of extension called the soul, and with that still lesser state of extension called the triad. Even the monad as we are it as a human being is a state of extension. The monad is in a state of extension from the universal logos. The monad is a state of extension from the universal logos. It's only the universal logos which is not in a state of extension, but then is it? What if that ray flashes forth as the absolute becomes the point? Every point is a state of extension. See, the universal logos is only the point. And there have been successive points, but they're all really one. All points forever are superimposed. and have no dimension. So there's only one point. It's almost as if you have the, allow me to joke here, okay? You have the pointless and the point. I think I brought this up in my book. Okay, the pointless is the absolute reality, which is the infinity of infinities, the infinitudinous, the ultimate infinity, UI. The pointless is the ultimate infinity. The point is everything else. And since there is nothing else, the point is the ultimate infinity too, but in the necessary illusion, which is cyclic, what we have is a CNI, cyclically necessary illusion. That's what a universe is. Cyclically necessary illusion. Sometimes we hear these words, son of necessity. It usually means something else, but in a way the universe is a son of necessity. And where is the necessity? Well, as I tried to say hopelessly, that if the absolute is to remain what it is, it has to be what it isn't. It has to apparently become what it isn't. And somehow we have to maintain same and different at the same time. Living our life, perceiving same, being same, and perceiving different. So let's put that down. Being same, BS, and perceiving difference. So being same and perceiving different or difference. Being same and perceiving different. That's the dual life in the ultimate sense. You know, you can say, well, being in the world yet not of it, so being the soul, having soul consciousness yet working in the world, that's a lower case. Necessary, absolutely necessary, and few there are who can achieve even that. I don't necessarily rank myself as one who can. But in the larger sense, being utterly the same and perceiving all difference. That's what we have to be able to do. Now, so often, you know, we just get involved in difference, and we forget same all the time. I've practiced sometimes, you know, visualizing like anything, and just sort of, you know, I use the S sound, and I think same. It's almost as if this magical S reduces the apparent difference to same. Well, you know, it's subtle. You have to work with it. You might find another way. But I'm really interested in reducing difference to same, while not pretending that apparent difference doesn't exist. It exists. It exists. Maybe it isn't, but it exists. So, you know, my magic words, you know, let's look at anything and attempt to reduce it to homogeneity. The serpent of reality is about to strike. I mean, we can all have our magical words, you know, which are just the technique of evocative words, whatever works for you. When Tennyson, the great poet, he used to repeat his name. Was it just Alfred? Was it the whole name? I'm not sure. Maybe it was just Alfred. And then the sense of being would come upon him, we've been told, in some of the mystical writings, or writings about the mystics. I mean, you know, Tennyson, in a way, was a great mystic. He was, I think, a sixth ray soul. Anyway, DK says he was on the sixth ray. A Leo on the sixth ray, with Gemini rising. You can't do a continuous D. You can't do a continuous D. Try to do a D for different, and it just breaks things up. But S the same. So it's really important to walk through life with the sense of utter sameness. They say, suss it out, you know? Suss it out. Sense. Utter sameness. That sameness is one of the most important things. Where's the variety of life, the color, you know, all the rest? Well, takes you to Rule 9, you know? Let the group realize, let the group know there are no other selves. Let the group know there is no color, only light. And then the darkness take the place of light, blotting out all form, hiding all difference, blotting out all form. So we're right there into the dark night of Shambhala, some light that is so intense that it's darkness. So I suggest cultivating the sense of utter sameness. This doesn't mean you're going to deny yourself difference. You are self-condemned to difference forever and forever have been. Difference is the cyclic appearance of the same. We just have to enjoy the difference while realizing it's the same. Again, in attempting to transcend duality, we must use duality. We sometimes imagine we will escape to some sort of already it's a contradiction, some kind of homogeneous state, and never suffer again. But there's only one being, and if there's any suffering anywhere through lack of the realization of identity, the main type of suffering, then everybody's suffering because everybody's the one being. There's no individual salvation. There's only the retraction of an emanation into the realization that the all-pervasive state ever has been, and then complete identification with all the non-retracted emanations. So we're all, you know, we are temporarily non-retracted emanations, all of us varying in terms of our development, which means in terms of the degree of our retraction. The more retracted, the more developed. You know, maybe the tiny unit of matter is the most extended emanation. Whatever density is, there is a limit by the will of the universal logos. We don't have an infinite manifestation for reasons that I argue in the infinitization book. Otherwise, we could have no cyclicity of universes. There would be no successive universes, and I'm just assuming that what the secret doctrine says is correct. The great breath is a great reality. Even though, in a way, well, it's the prototype of all duality. Does it really exist? Well, does the universe have any duration? Does the the suspended moment, the higher interlude, have any duration? Does anything have any duration? Does eternal duration have duration? Or is it all mysteriously now? Now, none of this is an incitement to impracticality. We are right here forever, cyclically, in the middle of the self-become illusion. And we have to deal with the illusion, and that's called practicality. So there's no escape. There's no escape into some homogeneous state where the multiplicity does not have to be encountered, dealt with, re-archetypalized, as it were, reconfigured until it reflects the archetype, which is the sustained pattern which purpose is. No escape, ever, ever. And of course, if someone imagines one has escaped into a higher state, if that is the imagination of some monad in extension, one then, through identification, realizes that one is also in the extended state of emanation and suffering through encapsulation. So, it's like Ramakrishna crossing the river in a boat, and the master is beating the slave on the other side of the river, and Ramakrishna says, "Who's beating me? Who's beating me?" He means it. It's not, "I'm Ramakrishna and the slave is the slave." I am the slave. I'm in a much higher state of abstraction, emanative retraction, much higher state. But I'm also out there in extension as the slave. And the Christ said, whoever has done this or something, done aught to the least of these, has done it unto me. And he means it, because he's a master of identification. He's a monad in retraction who has realized he's also forever the monad in extension until all extensions are retracted. So there's no escape from participating somehow in extension, in monadic extension, even though as a ray of the one, we are in the state of retraction. And that's paradoxical, because you think you're saved or something, you've achieved your salvation or something, but through the process of identification, you haven't, until every aspect of yourself is retracted. So, sense, utter sameness. Sense, be utter sameness. There's the bus. And not to rest content unless one knows oneself that way, and yet not relinquishing the encounter with variety, which is the encounter with the self-imposed diversification. We have self-imposed, of course, and it's not really that. That's not real. It's really, maybe you know what my A is going to stand for, self-imposed apparent diversification. No diversification is real. No multiplicity is real. It's only actual. It's only apparent. But we have to deal with the apparency. Well, I hope you can forgive the way I'm going through this. Anyway, realize real usefulness to hierarchy. Well, I can even make it now something that actually is an injunction. Realize usefulness. Or maybe like this, if I may, realize real usefulness to hierarchy, which means to the archetype, to purpose, to archetype, to that which is intended. we sometimes in our strictly human state, could I work with the master? Could I meet the master? Could I cooperate with the master? Be in the ashram? All of that. That's from the human state, but if we get a grasp of what the archetype is that they follow and try to express that in our own lives, then we will indeed realize real usefulness to hierarchy and to the greater archetype which is intended by the great thinker of the sphere in which we live and move and have our being. We just have to do it one sphere at a time, because, we we have to be useful to the sphere of the ashram, useful to the sphere of the Ray ashram, useful to the sphere of the hierarchy, useful to the sphere of Shambhala, useful to the sphere of the planet, to our globe, to our chain, and so forth, so forth. One ring past knot after another, which we will realize as monads in retraction. Remember that the essence of the monad is not what you find on the second level of the cosmic physical plane. The essence of the monad is pure being, and it's retractable into the one and only being of the universe, universal logos, and then ultimately retractable as the ray of the absolute. In other words, the point becomes pointless. And of course it is pointless to talk about these things, really. Or pointlessness. Yeah, the point, and there's no being that's not a point, no existence that's not a point, becomes pointless. We're on our way to pointlessness. And in a way, we've never left it. That's the paradox. I mean, if the monad stays at home and then goes out on a trip, and both are true, then the absolute is what it is, and yet apparently becomes the one and only point. Each universe is a point. Well, I wonder, I have an idea here that each universe is a point, and all such points having no duration are superimposed. And so time is not. Time is not. And when we say forever and forever and forever, and forever, we might as well say now. Forever and forever and forever is simply now. Well, it's going to take some adjustment of realization. We have intimations that these things may be so, but there are intensities of degrees of realization. And it's always been humorous to me to think that a human being can achieve in terms of realization what that multiplex being called a planetary logos can achieve, and on and on. Just doesn't make sense to me. It seems illogical. But every being in emanation has a schedule of retraction. And there's no sense to consider oneself as ultimately retracted when one has a universe of an apparent duration through which to proceed with that retraction. Every retraction is a revelation. Every, I'm going to make it a little more specific. Every emanative retraction is a revelation. And every emanative extension is how are you going to pronounce that? Every emanative extension is an encapsulation or limitation. Maybe that's easier to do. Okay, so every emanative extension is a limitation. Is a limitation. So we are in different stages of pracritic immersion, immersion into matter. Whoa, what happened? I think I pressed the wrong... we're back now. So all of us emanative extensions are in different states of pracritic immersion, or immersion into limited perception. I don't think matter really exists per se. Well, I get into trouble on that one. As a reality, I think it's a perception. To be is to be perceived. If there is no self-perception, there is nothing. Then you have to wonder, is the infinity of all infinities capable of self-perception, or only of beingness, being, beingness? Boy, am I progressing here at the rate of maybe 2 code words per program. But, you know, I tried to organize all this in infinitization of selfhood, but now a more spontaneous approach, if you will allow. I suppose it will begin with a certain number of listeners, which will thin out by the end of the program. Wow. I have here Ruth. What does it say here? I mean always. Oh yes, when one says always, such a word. Always. Okay. Always. And sometimes for emphasis I say, I mean always. I really do. I mean always. Forever. Now. We use words so glibly and, you know, as I say, without the proper energy content. I mean always. And I mean always. I have to impress this upon myself, what this word really means. Going apparently back a Googleplexian, you know, it's the drop in the bucket. A Googleplexian is the biggest number there is. It's been named. What do we got here? Googleplexian is an ultimate infinitesimal in relation to ultimate infinity. So you go backwards, apparently. There's no real backwards, but you go backwards. There's no real forwards, but you go forwards, at least in your illusory mind. And you talk about always and forever. And those words have a certain perceivability. They induce, such words induce a certain state of consciousness. Such words induce a state of consciousness characterized by eternality. Is there such a word? Eternality? The sense of the vast expanse of time. Of endless, on and on and on, duration, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. at least they give the registration of a different perception than sequentiality. So they are useful because we want to break our usual perceptions. That's the point. We want to break through our usual perceptions. We want to translate them into reality. We don't want to be encapsulated by our usual perceptions. That's the whole point of such thinking as this. Would you say the utmost impractical thinking in the world? So all you're doing is talking about nothing. But against that background of the no thing, against that sense of eternal duration, that's real ED, that's real education. Coming to grips with eternal duration and realizing it's only now. That's education. Eternal duration is only now. Edion. Eternal duration is only now. Setting that up will make the illusion ever so much more precious, meaningful, beautiful, joyful, and we will expend our creativity gladly in relation to the illusion. Well, like I say, I start these things. I never know where they're going to go. I start out with some prompts in a little red book. And these prompts start me off, but then what? Then what? So this is the end of Adventures in Identification number 2, series 2. So I did this before, Adventures in Identification, and we'll go on to number 3. But this way of thinking, talking, speaking, wrestling with nothing kind of takes it out of illusory you. Certainly takes it out of illusory me. So it may be a little while before I get back to this. Maybe tomorrow morning. I promised myself that before Uranus transiting hits my sun, conferring upon me the gift of realized simultaneity, I will work in that direction, work on the line of emanative retraction until the reality of simultaneity demonstrates itself more vividly than heretofore. Okay, friends, so I'm always a little bit over 1 hour, and maybe my colleague Brett can find what to cut out of these things so they're more like 1 hour. I suppose there's a lot of hems and haws and pauses for thought. But we're close to 1 hour, so I'll go on to number 3. I've managed to do only a few, but ended with Ruth. Realize real usefulness to hierarchy. I mean always, and I mean always, even if always is only now. Always is only now. That's like a word, isn't it? Look at that. Is only now. Aeon. Maybe by saying that word one can command the presence of the realization. Always is only now. Always is only now. We never get off the now. Never have, never will. It's the only real, non-dimensional moment that's ever occurred. So I think we can see why our usual human consciousness is not going to provide us with the answers we need outside of relativity. Within relativity, there are many answers, much knowledge, and we must manipulate relativity. Every one of us, monads in extension or emanative extensions, must do, manipulate relativity. But there's something beyond doing, and it is being, continuity of being, which, without sacrificing our practicality in the world of illusion, we must eventually achieve. That acts as if time is real, but for practical purposes, time is real. And we're going to have to be practical forever, as we have been. All right. We'll see you soon. All the best, which, of course, already exists forever.